Welcome to Means of Grace, the podcast from the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church, where we seek to make faith practical, joyful, and grounded in community. I'm your host, Reverend John Yeager. Jesse is away this week for some much-deserved R&R with his family, but don't worry, I have two exciting guests with me while Jesse's away. Today, we're talking about what just happened up in the mountains, Lake Junaluska, to be exact, where we gathered for our 2025 annual conference. I'm honored to be joined by these leaders, Bishop Ken Carter, welcome Bishop, and Reverend Kim Ingram, welcome both of you.
Good morning.
We're going to jump right in. This is our annual conference wrap-up episode. So, diving right in, for those of you who don't know, every year we make a pilgrimage, not just for the views or the barbecue, but for holy conferencing. At its core, annual conference is part family reunion, part legislative session, and part revival. And for generations, Lake Junaluska has been the sacred ground where we do this work. Why? Because there's just something about meeting God between the refrains and the roses. The Western North Carolina Conference meets each year at Lake Junaluska for this time of historical tradition, spiritual focus, and practical functionality. Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Lake Junaluska's Conference and Retreat Center offers a meaningful space for worship, fellowship, and renewal. It even has a labyrinth, lakeside walking paths, meditation gardens. And this is a moment where I like to send a shout out to Lake Junaluska, who I believe showed up. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is. But I certainly noticed staff everywhere. And they were always asking questions, always asking what they could do. I even had internet. It was quite amazing. And it's home. So, Bishop, what does Lake Junaluska mean personally for you, and what's one moment from this conference that you thought captured maybe the whole feeling of this one in 2025?
Well, good morning. Hello, John. Hello, Kim. And thanks for this. Thanks to all who are listening. I think Junaluska, what it means to me, is the place I really came to know this annual conference as a certified candidate for ministry, as being ordained here, coming here every year, reconnecting with friends, listening to a lot of people teach and preach, and then being consecrated a bishop, and now our conference gathering. So it's just a holy place for me. And there are many around our annual conference. This is an important one. And then I think the moment in the conference that I'm committing the sin of omission. There were a lot of great moments, but you asked for one. For me, it was undeniably when Brian Mateer and Maggie Armstrong were asking for people to stand who had been affected by the hurricane, their homes, their businesses, their churches, their friendships, and then who were in a rebuilding phase to stand, churches that were engaged with it to stand, those who had given labor to stand, those who had prayed to stand, those who had sent teams to stand. And the place was pretty full, as Stewart Auditorium was really throughout. And by the end, it really was a show of solidarity and shared mission and relationships. And this year, this was simply a defining mark of our life together. And that for me was very powerful. I'll never forget it. Yeah.
I agree. All right, Kim, same question to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. And so for Lake Junaluska, one of the things that I think is particularly special about it, especially as I talk to colleagues about other kind of contexts for annual conference, is that it allows for families to come and really enjoy the time of being there. And we had the camp that the foundation hosted, and I think we had 65 children participate in that. And I know from my own children's experience, just a chance to connect with other people that then you see again and again,
Yeah.
and may end up being in ministry or in church or in relationship with later. I think that opportunity to have it at the lake and for that to be developed is very special. Your question about holy conferencing, I'm going to take a little bit different direction, because when I think about those words, holy conferencing, I really think about what that means for us as the church to be meeting together in a particular way. And so the example I'm going to give that really sticks out to me as an example of holy conferencing, I know we may talk a little bit more about in another way later. But when we got to the organization and rules part, which is toward the beginning of conference, it's the kind of procedural matters that we do in the introductory session. And we were making a change to the connectional table that proposed including more diverse voices at the table. And the holy conferencing is how that went. So a layperson stood up and went to the mic, asked a couple questions, made a recommendation to add vote. And there was a respectful conversation among the body, where people were able to speak about it. And then we took a vote of the body and made the change to add voice and vote. And I think the experience is a model for churches of what it means to in holy, respectful, maybe challenging ways, but also to listen and to discern together God's work as a body. I think it's an example for churches to follow as well, because the purpose of holy conferencing includes the body of Christ doing the work of the church for the sake of the kingdom in ways that allow for healthy conversation, listening to diverse viewpoints, and for every voice to count. And so that for me was a particular moment of holy conferencing when we were together.
Love it. I couldn't agree more. And it passed overwhelmingly. And it was one of those moments, and we are going to talk about it just a little bit later, that we're not quite sure what we did yet. In a good way, maybe, in a positive way, but we're feeling out. We feel like we did the right thing, but how do we now, as they say, what's the method, right? How do we really make that actually impact what it was aiming for? But that's the hard work, and we are going to talk about that in just a little bit. But I want to move on to the Hurricane Helene. We've talked about it now, and Bishop, you said that was probably the most meaningful moment for you, was Brian getting up there and emotionally drained, and not in a bad way, in that kind of spiritual way, and then he gave us something, right? He gave us that moment for those who could stand up. So this is one of the stories that shaped our year, and it wasn't typical. In fact, it was extremely atypical. It was about rain and wind and devastation, the church showing up in new ways. Hurricane Helene caused a lot of damage in our region, particularly in western counties. Brian Mateer spearheaded the relief efforts, and now Maggie Armstrong will be kind of taking over the long term, and I mean long term. She taught me, listen, this Florida boy I had never heard the rule of 10. Honestly, and I felt a little ashamed. I looked around, I thought, oh my God, I didn't know. How did I not know this? This sounds fun, and I'm never going to forget it now, though, and we'll talk about that too, of that multiplying, how long-term things are, and what can the church learn from that. A couple of numbers. Our conference showed up. Hundreds of volunteers participating in recovery, over 4,000 cleaning buckets, over 400 ERTs have been trained, over 800 volunteers have logged over 25,000 hours of volunteer work, and we are still counting. What was raised was about just under $6 million, and again, still counting. So, Bishop, Jesse and I had Nathan and Sally, Nathan Alders and Sally Queen, on the podcast before Sally was a DS, because I thought, embodied the connectional atmosphere that was at the heart of our response. That we are not just individual churches. We reach out to each other, not out of need, but out of, that's just what we do. That is a part of who we are, and that should be enough. So how do we, Bishop, in your mind, what did you feel was how strong was the connection? In those times, in those early times, from your own wife jumping in right away, to your experience, to DS's, to local. How did you feel about the connection when that first started?
Yeah, we're all reliving this as you talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, to begin with, in the leadership, we began meeting weekly in a kind of a crisis meeting, and that was the superintendents of the areas affected, Brian, Amy Coles, Mark King, the treasurer, and some others. That took a different shape as time went on. It was primarily in the Blue Ridge and Appalachian districts. So Lori Beth Huffman, Mark Rawls, Maggie Armstrong came in. My wife Pam and some others, Laura Otten, Susan Ewing, and others set up a call center. They tried to really connect with local churches, connect with people. This is something we learned how to do in Florida.
That was crucial. It really was.
Early on, it was for me going back and forth in and out of two very different environments. And one environment was the environment of devastation and none of the usual support systems we had, like cell access or power. So no light, no air conditioning, etc. And then also just no clean water, no drinking water. And so what I began to see, and it's wonderful. You've listened to Sally and Nathan and Myers Memorial, Harrison. They're indicative of a lot of churches that just channeled needed resources. It wasn't junk. It wasn't the usual stereotypical criticism of people don't know what they're doing and they just send junk. That's not what happened.
No, it was intentional.
What happened was it was done in a very sophisticated, coordinated way. I unloaded one of those trucks in Fletcher with Randy Sherrill and the people there. And it was exactly what people were saying they needed: water, propane, infant formula, diapers, peanut butter, etc. And so that sort of mission just flowed through churches into the affected areas. And so that was one dynamic. The other was, and this is relevant to annual conference, when you have a year where, 29 conferences were kind of in a state of emergency, the others were in a state of compassion and concern, but life went on. And so how to bring a big body of people together and do that. And we'll get to this later too, but our focus on trauma in the conference. We have stakeholders in our conference, persons whose communities have been in trauma for 400 years. And the trauma of racism, the trauma of exclusion, the trauma of a natural disaster, the trauma of what women in leadership go through to be leaders. And so it's really, a conference is trying to get people to hear each other's stories and not to bury their own stories, but to share them. And that requires maturity among people who will move toward each other, listen to each other. And anyway, that's where we're on the journey. But I love this conference. I'm really proud of the way people responded to each other. And as I mentioned at conference, it was true across annual conferences. Bishop Tracy Smith Malone, her conference was one of the first ones to send resources. And then UMCOR as an infrastructure to help us be trained. And it all works together. And anyway, it's been overwhelming. And there's no other way to say it. It was an agenda that affected every other agenda.
Oh, yeah.
And I would say even going to Junaluska, for people to have the empathy of knowing that every staff person they met went through this.
Yeah.
And I knew staff people at Junaluska who lost their homes. And so it's just for us to be attentive to each other at our best in conferencing. That's what we do.
I love it. Yeah. Um, and so now to both of you, before we move on from the hurricane, how do we ensure? So I couldn't agree more, Bishop. It brought us closer together. And I can't help but be slightly biblical, if everybody will forgive this pastor, but that idea of a catastrophe bringing a people together is just true. It's just divine. It's just how we work. So when that happens, right, we saw it in the Bible with the Israelites, something would happen, it would bring them together, but then God would say, all right, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with this newfound community, this newfound, joy of all being together? Go do something with it. So my question to y'all, and maybe Kim, you can speak to it first here. How do we ensure this isn't a moment? How do we? I mean, if disaffiliation, the political atmosphere, the hurricane haven't at least shown us that we have cracks, because we all do. We're moving to perfection. How do we make sure that momentary togetherness wasn't just a moment, but a model? How do we use it as a model to sustain community within our conference?
So, John, I think one of the things that the hurricane will model for us, and that United Methodists really get it right, and part of that is that we're in it for the long haul. Yeah. And so as a church, we're in it for the long haul. In disaster recovery, we're in it for the long haul. And we continue to invest resources, staff, and time until it's done. We continue to encourage participation. Even while we were at annual conference, there was a team from the church where I have my church conference, First United Methodist in Belmont, doing recovery in Asheville. We'll have an offering on the anniversary of the hurricane in September, conference-wide, and we'll keep it in front of people. Those are all kind of models for how we continue to build community, not only around the hurricane, but around how we do it in our churches and in our communities. I thought this was a different question, and so I want to answer what I thought was a different question.
Go for it. No, hey, this is what it's for. Go for it.
Because I really was thinking about this in terms of long haul, and so I think that it's important that we continue to pay attention to creation care. And we have a Western North Carolina creation care team. Every church, as of last annual conference, was supposed to have a local church creation care team. In the fall, overlapping with a hurricane anniversary, is the season of creation. And we are co-creators with Christ. In the beginning, God created and then called humans to be co-creators and caretakers of that gift. So not only as it relates to hurricane relief, but as it relates to all of creation, we have a responsibility for that. And we also have kind of advocacy and resources that we get from the North Carolina Council of Churches, the General Board of Church and Society, the United Methodist Women in Faith, to enable advocacy and for laws to help us to be good stewards of God's creation. So I think that's a role of the church, and it's important thinking about these environmental disasters that continue to get worse and happen more often, that we need to be a part of that ongoing work for the long haul as well. So sorry to take that in a different direction, but that's really important to me. So I really
it was. No, I genuinely thank you. that was actually really, really helpful.
Great,
yeah. So moving, go ahead, Bishop.
No, I would just say thank you, Kim. We know hurricane season is coming in the fall. The Gulf is warming, and we actually have some people across the jurisdiction also beginning to think about how to do this work across conference lines, because when Helene touched down in Spruce Pine, at the same moment it touched down in Perry, Florida, and this was a massive storm that crossed annual conference lines, and so I would add to that, the word we. Yeah. I just have learned over the last 15 years, I don't assume we. I want everyone to be a part of it. I want everyone to support each other, to be an ally to each other, to come alongside someone else in their need, also to be blessed when they themselves have a need. We simply have to work on the we. And I can just say in Florida, I went to places after natural disasters. We joined hands, we prayed, we were a connection, and a year later, they were departing.
Yeah.
And we were in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And so, did I assume that that natural disaster brought us together? I do not. It's something we have to work on. And I will say that I saw the connection come to life and heard people in churches, lay and clergy say that. And my passion is to try to keep building on that, and just to say out loud, the we, especially in this society, especially what we've been through, the we, something we have to work on.
Absolutely. It should be one of our non-negotiables, right?
Yeah.
It really should be. But speaking of the future there, and what it's going to look like, we collected nearly $6 million towards those relief efforts, but that's not where we stopped. Generosity continued into our Giving It conference with just over $25,000 for what? Youth camps, right? Spaces where the seeds of faith are planted in the hearts of young disciples. Camps like Toccoa Foothills, Mount Shepherd, help shape the next generation of faith leaders. So, Bishop, the world seems to change overnight these days. And if we have ever needed young people more, I don't know when it was, for a variety of reasons, right? So what's special about these camps? Why do we set aside a whole annual conference worth of giving, to that future?
I think I love your phrase. We need. It's not that young people need something from us. We also need them. Yep. And a camp is a context where a young person can be in the midst of God's creation, as Kim was talking about, where they can listen for God's voice. It should be a safe space where they can think about their lives and their purpose. And for many people that happens. I know my call to ministry is related to a camp experience. I was a camp counselor. Kim and I had been in our camps before. And we have ongoing relationships with these camps. And I'll just say a word about Harambe. It is the camp for the historic Black church. And there's just a need for that to be a safe space for youth in the Black church. And so we put that on kind of an equal footing, not only our conference camps, but Harambe. And so it was simply a recognition that this is what we want to invest in. And also simultaneously with our conferencing, people were in these camps. So that was the purpose.
Kim, do you want to build on that, or do you have a camp story of your own that you want to share?
Well, maybe a little bit of both. So our other conference camp is Camp Gilrock, and I didn't know this till recently, and I'm embarrassed I didn't. It's Guilford and Rockingham counties. That's where the name came from. And so that's also kind of where it's located. But I'm a huge advocate of camps and participate in camping. I did it a little bit as a child, actual structured camps. I've camped all my life. But it was significantly has shaped my children. And so my daughter started going to one of our conference camps when she was in kindergarten, and we lived close enough to do day camp. And then my son started going when he was in second grade because we did not live close enough, so we had to do overnight camp. And both of them went every year all the way through high school, served as CITs, and then again as counselors in college. So I've been able to see how it shaped their faith. Even as I think it has contributed to my son's call to ministry, and he has just finished his first year at Duke Divinity School. So I think the power of camps is really evident in the lives of people who have participated both as campers and as staff. But I also think that camp is for us an example of how we develop healthy minds, bodies, and spirits. And if we can help our young people begin to learn how to do that as children and adolescents, hopefully it will carry over into their adulthood. Maybe one of the best things about camp is that it's device free. And everything we hear these days is how important it is to give up devices for periods of time for our children, and yet it's so hard to take them away.
Yep.
But camp is just you're so well entertained and distracted and engaged in other ways that you can't have it and you don't need it, and hopefully don't miss it. It's an example of lifelong formation. You build friendships, and you learn how to build friendships with people you didn't know. In a setting that's unfamiliar. I think that's a life skill among other life skills, as simple as cooking over a campfire, around being safety around water, around creation care. Like, all of those are things that camp gives that maybe we don't think about, as well as creativity and courage. So there's just so much to being a camper or participating in a camp that one learns. I highly recommend it. As you can tell, I'm a big fan.
Well, yeah, and it's not just the kids. It's the counselors that you talk to, the people that have been counselors in the past. It changes their whole direction in a beautiful way, I think. But we love camp, and they're for our youth, our young people, who we hope will be growing up any day now, because we need them desperately. I don't know about y'all, but you couldn't help but see the youth tent, right? It was right there on the corner, and they always had 8 to 10 youth always buzzing around trying to sell us the t-shirts. I admit I bought 2 more. I got well, I was going to say I got taken
One in
for
every
it.
color.
Yeah, that's right. They tried to I had one color that I hadn't gotten yet, but I said, no, you got me already. You fleeced me. But I think they sold out. And a shout out to the LeMaster Smiths, especially Shannon, for really being there, a presence, right, for the youth, and giving them some passion, or at least being a safe place. That's what I want to say. Being a safe place, and they're showing the passion. So this year saw an increase in licensed, commissioned, and ordained clergy in our conference, okay? A new generation coming up. The work of the Board of Ordained Ministry was tireless, and the ordering service, electric. One of the most moving moments was, of course, Bishop, when you invited anyone in attendance to come down, and I think 3 hearts got touched. And those are just, you have to nurture, right? I saw there was at least 3. I don't know how many there actually were. At the end, you probably have a better number. But it was genuine. It was real. And you could feel it. So, Kim, let's go to you first. What do you believe is behind our little uptick, right? A solid uptick in ordination, and those pursuing ministry now. What is your insight, which is probably better than all of ours, on right now, right? Those pursuing ministry in this day.
Yeah, John, it was exciting, and it's exciting to journey alongside of those folks who are experiencing a call to ministry and then pursuing it through the licensing and ordination processes. I do think one thing that contributes right now as a result of the 2024 General Conference is there's a new energy in the United Methodist Church that is contagious. And I think youth and young adults see the church connecting in the world and in communities in significant ways. And in a variety of ways, in fresh expressions in third places, in service and engagement in communities and partnerships, and through justice and reconciliation as a priority. And those are the kinds of things that matter to young people. And when they see the church engaged, then they want to be a part of that engagement. Yeah. As well, we've had a renewed emphasis at the conference level. So you mentioned Shannon. I'd also mention Skylar, Shagoda, and Megan Hobbick, who all do the work related to our conference Council on Youth Ministry, the Children in Worship Grant, the new Spark program. All of these things are helping people think about their relationship with God, their call to ministry, their gifts for service, and their leadership development. And as we can do that in the conference and in local churches and partnering with local churches, for children and youth to recognize this, so as they become young adults, they're thinking about how God is calling them, and gifting them, and what might be next for them. So it's really exciting.
It is. Bishop, you can build on that, and then I have a question for you if you want to.
Okay. Just everything Kim said is right on point. I would say for some, it is the removal of the discriminatory language.
Hmm.
This was important not only for LGBTQIA persons, but also persons for whom they're allies in this. They have family members in this,
Yes.
and it was just the timing of it. So I think that's the large number. I'm not aware of an annual conference in the United States that had a larger number of persons, and it's not a competition, but it's
But
just
if
an
it was,
extraordinary. It's just an extraordinary pool of people, and so that was great. I would say about the ordination service, the persons who said yes to the call. That's a significant part of it. I would say having our own elders and deacons be wearing robes and
Hmm.
stoles, local pastors wearing robes, just that show of presence
Yeah.
and not sort of blowing it off and going out to dinner, but saying, you're important. This group of people is important. We're
Yes.
going to be there for you.
Hmm.
I think for many of them, that was a very significant experience. And then you could see the relationships after the service ended, of people who saw people who were part of their callings and were supporters and mentors. And then I think asking people to respond to considering a call in that moment, and being prayed for. Many clergy in our conference, a number do trace their callings to an experience like that.
Yeah.
So I thought the service that evening was wonderful, and I'm very grateful. We invest a lot
Yeah.
in clergy leadership, and it's wonderful on an evening like that. You see the fruit of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my specific question for you, Bishop, is you have, it's not unique, but it certainly is in our conference, a unique perspective on bringing new people, into this elder deacon, this family of the ordained. I don't do that. Kim doesn't do that. At a level you have the. How does it feel personally for you when you get the ordering service and knowing, oh, I'm not just clergy. I'm the bishop.
Yeah. Well, it is, bishop is a very unusual kind of role, but ordaining people is a very privileged act. And, we have a retreat every spring with the persons who are being ordained. Kim Ingram is present, Amy Coles is also present, where we hear their stories of conversion and call, and I really want to know them as individuals. It's a very diverse group, actually much more diverse than our general culture. They come from multiple nations. They often come from other churches, other church traditions, and yet something leads them there to this place. And so it's a wonderful experience to see the diversity of how they express their ministries. And also, this just been a real gift, is a real gift to me, having made that exact same journey.
Yeah.
In other words, when I was a certified candidate and then went before the board and then walked across that same stage
Yeah.
and was ordained. And so to be able to be a part of that for others is just a real gift. And I think going through the ordination questions, for example, this year I was particularly struck by how relevant the prophetic ministry is with many of our clergy who are taking that very seriously around coming alongside the immigrant community, for example. And I said this to several of them when I was there. I said, as I've gone over these ordination services, I have thought about you, and I'm grateful for you. They know I support them, but it's integral to what we say we're going to be and do when we're ordained.
Absolutely. And I thought, personally, I thought especially the younger folks getting ordained and going through the process, but also for the youth, there was a tone shift, I thought, away from, and just the way that it had been for so long, which was generally the generations of clergy, when we were bursting at the seams, would essentially say, welcome to the church. It's great. It's amazing. Please come in and you're going to be a part of it, but you got to start low. I mean, it was very it was kind of from the one side down to the ones being ordained, not in a bad way, but just you're inheriting something amazing.
Yeah.
I thought an important shift has been recognition of this isn't what it used to be. We're not handing the young people a bursting church, right? We're all experiencing a lot of brokenness. It's a moment. Right. It's a moment we can't let go, and I think the young people have felt it. But I noticed a gratitude towards them, to them, for them coming into our family instead of the other way around. And I thought that was powerful.
Yeah. I think that's true, and I think I would extend that. I even said that multiple times to anyone who was in the auditorium. I mean, we don't take anybody for granted. Now, we had Stewart Auditorium was full when Bishop Smith Malone was preaching.
Oh,
it was full many other times.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't take that for granted. Also, Bishop Jose McLaughlin and I talked about how, both of our churches have been humbled.
Yes.
We've gone through a lot, and some self-inflicted wounds, some being targeted from the outside, and I would also say, and Kim knows these people very well also, many people come into ministry with a lot of brokenness themselves.
Yes.
So they may be serving in a broken church. They also bring the brokenness that often comes to them, and this is why the work of trauma is important.
Yeah.
In our conference that Lori Beth Huffman leads. And so it's to recognize, like the last sermon I preached, this idea of the wounded healer, that we are called to help be a part of the healing and repair of the world, and that also includes us. So we are grateful, yes.
Yeah, and it's just, I thought it was beautiful that was kind of a focus, of saying, thank you for coming in. We need you. And we do. We just do. Anyways, right. Kim, was there something you wanted to add to that, or you?
No, yes. So yes, and as it relates to churches and their role and responsibility in helping shape call,
yes,
and give opportunity for young people, and not only young people, but all people to identify, recognize their call. I mentioned Spark, and that's a new tool that Megan is training people to use in local churches. And the reminder that it is the responsibility and role of the church to have intentional structures for support and encouragement, growth and development, for leadership opportunities, and to name that to people as they see gifts, lay and clergy leaders to really nurture that in young people as they're coming up, and to give them roles and responsibilities that help them to own it and to embrace it. And so really want to encourage churches in that way.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And it's training the next generation and building up. And so they one day become the Reverend Gregory Geralds and the Bishop Tracy Malones and the Dr. Sam Moores, right? These are, like you said, and Bishop Jose McLaughlin. Bishop, as you said, you started, right, at a camp. You started all of these powerful leaders, Bishop Sue Halpert Johnson, they started, right, in the pews. They started real young. So I just wanted to take a moment and thank them and highlight that this whole journey is a long one, right? We don't know who ends up being bishop, who ends up being district superintendent, or a prolific author, and we nurture. So I just wanted to say, and I thought Reverend Gregory Gerald's preaching on Juneteenth was powerful, and it was inspiring. Bishop, I know you were there. Do you remember that the buzz in the room for having it in the auditorium?
I do, and I want to say a couple of words. One, we think every year about how to acknowledge the importance of Juneteenth within the annual conference calendar, and so this year we had an evening service. Thank you to Reverend Don Hand,
Yes,
who planned that, who designed it. So this year, the connection was Reverend Gerald and Reverend Keith Turman, who embody how our pastors in these 44 counties at the local level have deep relationships of trust and do the work of overcoming racism in where they are. And so that was the foundation of it. How Reverend Gerald got there was we were talking with Keith Turman about how we could do this in this context. His sermon really centered the Black church preaching experience.
yes,
And that's a part of what our conference is called to do. For a majority Anglo conference, and we are, our region is majority Anglo, it is to center an experience that is not the majority. And so he was expressing the Black church and the Black preaching voice. And as we heard, the Black church has not had the luxury of separating spirituality and politics.
No.
For survival and flourishing, they must be together. So I want to name that. And then if you're listening, I want to name something else. And that was the strong presence of Anglo allies at that service.
yes,
And to me, perhaps in a singular way in that annual conference, you talked about showing up. They showed up.
yeah,
So if an Anglo person from a rural area shows up to a Juneteenth service, what they're saying is, we want to be your ally.
yeah,
We don't want to say this for you. We don't want to presume to say we know your experience, but they're raising their hand and saying, we're willing to be your ally.
yeah,
Our nation needs that.
yes,
Our church needs that. I would say that was another very powerful experience for me. So I thought it was an amazing service, and they're our full communion partners, the AME Zion Church. And so it was great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we could use a blend. Listen, there's plenty of preaching that I've heard that could use a run or two, because they are powerful. And I sends chills up my spine every time. I love it. So same venue here. We had some powerful, impactful minds, some powerfully impactful spirits. I will take a just really quick moment of privilege because Bishop Sue Halbert Johnson was up there, and I shouted orange, and right back at me blue, and it just felt so good being national champion.
You two and she are a part of what I call the Gator diaspora.
The Florida diaspora. That's right.
You have made your way to the Mid-Atlantic, and we're glad you're here. But we allow the nostalgia of Gainesville, Florida.
That's right. Yeah. There's a little saltiness after winning the basketball national championship. I felt it. I felt it very palpably. This seems to be a basketball state.
It is.
I love it.
And now we can claim a basketball school.
That's right. That's right. We're whatever we want to be. All right, that's enough bragging.
You get to do that. Yeah.
That's right. We get to do that. But that Florida diaspora was actually very, I'm going to say helpful, impactful for the hurricane. I felt like everybody reached out to everybody who's ever lived in Florida and said, hey, help. The connection reached across Georgia, thank goodness. Sorry, Georgia. Yeah. And all the way to Florida, right? And that, from Pam being in the hurricanes to when the Bishop Sue Halbert Johnson was telling that story of being in the hurricane, I was in that hurricane. And so she was telling it, and I was like, oh, gosh. I started to get kind of nervous. My trauma kind of kicked in because our dorms flooded because I was at Florida Southern.
Yeah. And if I could just say, just saying a word, I think we're talking about the people who came and taught and preached.
Yeah.
I would just say, I'll say some things on here. I won't say other places. I
Please.
never invite anyone as a favor.
I
So in
like
other
that.
words, it's not like I'm in a group. I want to do a favor for someone. That maybe they'll do a favor for me. That's not what I do. I only invite people who I think are going to be extraordinary communicators and from whom people will learn something. And I also always try to have a slate of preachers and teachers who are more diverse than our annual conference. And so you can look at every year I've been here, if you look at the composite preachers and teachers, they communicate that, which is it's a way of saying to the people who come, this is the church. This is hopefully our direction. I want to say just one thing Bishop Smith Malone said when she quoted, I think, a scholar and said, justice without mercy is brutality.
Yeah.
Mercy without justice is sentimentality. That really struck a chord. Is how to do a just mercy. I thought her teaching about unity as our witness was powerful. I thought Bishop Harper Johnson about being on the grid of support and spiritual practices was important. Bishop Jose talking about the body of Christ. I mean, my hope and prayer is that within a couple of years we'll be in full communion with the Episcopal Church.
Hey.
I believe that we will. And then Dr. Sam Moore just talking about grief and the importance of grief and seeing those families. It just was all very powerful. I'd also mentioned Santosh Narula and Chuck Wilson in the retirement service, how they spoke. It was all very powerful, and I was grateful for it all.
It was. And you keep mentioning diversity, and I keep meaning to tell you that one of my favorite quotes, Peter Enns is one of my favorite Christian authors these days, and he wrote in the beginning chapter of one of his books that God's wisdom is diversity over time. And I went, yeah, it is. That experience God accumulate, that allness, that wholeness that God accumulates over time in us and through us. Yeah. So God's wisdom is when you have multiple perspectives, because we're kind of trapped in our own.
Absolutely.
John, I want to take a minute to give a shout out to the worship committee.
Absolutely.
The backdrop, the kind of the visual images that they continually created, but then also the one that on the back that, the rainbow just represents diversity.
It was gorgeous.
It is, and it was gorgeous. The voices of the musicians and the different people who were speaking and participating. We made some changes this year to encourage that. For example, in the celebration of life service, the ordinations used to always be the liturgists and the bell ringers, and so in that way we only had the people participating who were in the ordination class, and we ceased that tradition. So there was another worship service that allowed for more variety, more diversity of voices and participants. So there were some children in several of the services. Youth that participated in a variety of ways, and I just really shout out to the worship team for all of that.
Absolutely.
So especially Kari Edwards and Angela Burris are two names we want people to really.
And Rebecca Ralph Schuford, she was
Rebecca
also
Ralph,
she was running.
yeah.
She had her headset on the whole time.
Good.
Yep, she did great. We've got a team, and we're never run out of people that want to be a part of that, and it's wonderful.
Let's hope not.
Go ahead.
No, let's hope we don't run out of people. We always need people.
If we start running out of people to ring the bells, that's our sign, right? Lord God, we have failed to be an obedient church. We have not done your will. We're going to, at the end of this episode, you'll have lots of notes and lots of links to various things, but I wanted to touch on the constitutional amendments and some connectional changes, which we mentioned earlier, but we should really talk about why it's just not just important, but we are genuinely missing a part of our faith when we don't. So that's our bad if we do that. But this year, several amendments have been considered, measures that affect not just Western North Carolina, but the entire denomination. Changes approved to our own connectional table, restructuring it and how we share ministry with one another within our conference. So, Kim, what would you say were the, if you could really quickly touch on what the amendments were? We have done an episode on it, so just to kind of refresh people's memory, and what the next steps might be.
Sure. So the first one was regionalization.
Yeah.
The second one was inclusion of women and people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. The third one was a statement around diversity and I can't remember what the title of it was. Isn't that terrible? You get away from something.
I know, right? He dumped it all out.
Yeah.
And the fourth one was really around the educational requirements of local pastors to vote on clergy delegates to General Conference. And the next steps are we have submitted our vote tally. It goes along with every other annual conference's vote tally to the General Conference Secretary and to the Council of Bishops Secretary, and then they will count them once they're all in, and later in the fall, hopefully, the Council of Bishops will be able to announce the outcomes, and if they are approved by 2/3 of all the aggregate votes, then they will become part of the Constitution. I also wanted to name just some immediate implications regardless of the outcome of the constitutional amendments based on our conversation at the annual conference meeting. And I think the discussion at annual conference reminds us that we're not all of one mind. And so some of the implications of that is there's room for difference in the church. That's something about what it means to be United Methodist. And there's continued work to do. And in some of the pre-conference sessions when we were educating people around the constitutional amendments, several people said to me that they agreed with the amendments, especially the number 2 and number 3, but couldn't we just say that God loves all people and so do we, or something like that? Do we need to have kind of the detail and the specifics? And I think in a different culture, in a different context, we could say that. But I'm not sure that context ever existed except in the beginning of creation. So I think we have to name the harm that is done directly. We have to advocate for change, and we have to specifically do the work that continues. And so in a perfect world, we would say we all love each other, we love God, God loves us. But in our real world, that's not good enough. And so the implications of the constitutional amendments remind us of that.
Yeah. And I believe regionalization is the biggest one that we did, and why, right? So, Bishop, do you want to build on what Kim was talking about, or add your own?
Just thank you, Kim, for the way you articulate that. Mm-hmm. Just maybe coming at it from a different point of view. I've had a lot of experience with the church in the Philippines, the church in Europe, the church in Africa, and I know we often have a kind of a hermeneutic of distrust about anything, but this really did come from United Methodism beyond the United States. Mm-hmm. People really wanted to be able to do conferencing in a way that was not U.S. centric. Yeah. And so I've heard that from leaders across the world. They were the primary spokespersons of this at the 24 General Conference. And so I really honor that. I think also, I hope we are a regional conference after all of this. We've had the vote, it's done. Bishops don't vote, we preside, that's good. It will force us, help us to see the U.S. church, to see us for who we really are. How vital are we? How open are we? How are we present on our borders? How can we engage really important realities that are in our nation that's hard to do as a worldwide church? And so I'm looking forward to that. A lot of new generations of leaders will do that work. And then I would just want to say, since we've got the time here, someone said to me at one point, a friend said, a bishop tries to teach and lead about the work of the church until the annual conference, until the conference. So I was an advocate for these amendments. Kim and I did a video. We were advocates for the passage of these amendments. But once I get to annual conference, my role is simply to try to have a fair process where people in an equal way can speak in favor of something or in opposition to something. And we heard that.
Yes.
And I think the same was true if I could extend into the composition of the connectional table. There are many ways to interpret a reality. As another friend of mine says, there's a proverb, even children of the same mother can disagree. And so we do. 1,500 people, there's disagreement.
Yeah. Good.
What I saw, and people can see it through their own lens. This is my lens. I saw two different perspectives. As Kim said, they were shared in a civil way. The body, in its wisdom, chose to be more inclusive and more representative.
Yes.
With voice and vote. That was, without question, the will of the body, and that's how we move forward. I see that as constructive.
Yeah.
I see that as a positive next step. However, children of the same mother can disagree.
Yeah.
And so we continue to try to work together. But those were probably the significant moments of doing legislative work. Legislative work is not the primary purpose of an annual conference, but there are times when we need to do it.
And it is the way everybody gets to participate.
Yes.
So that's something that's significant about our denomination. At General Conference, everybody that's a member or a delegate gets a vote. And an annual conference, everybody participates, and depending on what we're voting on, gets a vote. And so I think that's significant, and it's what it means to meet. I mean, it's part of who we are and what we do every year.
Yeah.
Yep.
It has to be.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It has to be. Yeah. So I want to really quick just say that there was some, I'm not going to say voices of dissension. That's a nice term for regionalization. And I spoke to a couple of people that did have opposition to it because I was curious. And it was one of those moments where I heard them. And yet, as we said, it was still what we should and need to do. It is if you want to say small, a small step towards being a little bit less unified. And if we don't recognize that, even if it's 99% good, if we don't recognize that, there is this 1% that is requiring us to, fight some things a little bit less, right? And recognizing that and the reason why to recognize it is to have more intention about keeping the connection, right? To have more passion for it instead of relying just on the fact that we're inseparable.
And I would connect, therefore, the movement toward us from the Ukraine-Moldova Provisional Conference to have a covenant relationship.
Yes.
They have talked with us, met with us, written to us, and said, we would like to have a covenant relationship. This is the United Methodist Church in Ukraine today.
Yes.
And so to me, I hold those two together, regionalization and connection with another part of the world in a deeper way. And so we're going to journey toward this. We've had a lot of positive response thus far. We have people in our conference who know people in that part of the world and have done mission there. And so that'll be about starting new churches there, about prayer, about at some point maybe a leadership center there, support of clergy, mutual learning. What can they teach us about living in a time of violence and war and keeping faith? And so to me, that's very important. I think you're right, John. That's very important for us to show the persons who wonder legitimately, are we disconnecting? It's very important for us to show how we're connected. We're
Yes.
not just connected by the people who gather every 4 years and work on global matters. We're connected at the level of mission.
Yes. Absolutely. Before we sign off here, are there any other things that either of you wanted to make sure that we touch on before we sign out here?
Kim, I'll let you go.
Well, so your question had been what is coming. So I'm just
Yeah.
going to put a quick plug, and that
Please.
is for Beyond, which is the conference we're hosting in October, 3rd and 4th, around evangelism, inclusion, hospitality, and welcome. So it's for clergy and laity. And it really, I think, will help churches kind of embrace their identity and recognize what it means to be kind of the body of Christ in their community, and how to invite and welcome people into their ministry, maybe not into their sanctuary. I mean, that may be part of it, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. So
Yes.
anyway, that's what's coming that I'm excited about, and we'll be promoting in the next month or so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I would add, First John, thank you for the podcast, and Jesse. I would add, conferencing is really a part of our DNA.
Yes.
And I attended annual conference as a pastor for 29 years. So I would come to Lake Junaluska. It was never a perfect experience.
No.
I never thought too much about the bishop, what was going on with the bishop. I was there because it was a way to see some people I only saw once a year, people who were very important to me. And I learned a lot from some of the preachers and teachers. I can think of like Fred Craddock, Robert Franklin. I mean, I can think of people from the past who came and were preachers and teachers. And then I was a delegate to 4 general conferences. And so I would say when I went to those general conferences, in none of them did I come away thinking I agree with everything we've done.
No, yeah.
Or even I'm happy with everything
Right.
we've done. And so conferencing is something that teaches us a kind of humility
Yes.
to express our conviction. So I would say to anyone listening, if you got strong convictions, express them. Don't bury them.
Yes.
Put them out there for us. In a most healthy way, we do that in the spirit of Matthew 18. We go to people individually and meet and have those conversations. But it's a part of being a part of something larger.
Yes.
And as I said to the clergy, we're not a congregational church.
No.
We're a connectional church. And there are going to be times when we need that connection. There are going to be times when that connection needs us.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of good in the connection. Again, we're not
Yes.
perfect. This isn't like a civic club speech for us.
That's right. No, thank God, right? That we're not perfect.
There's a lot of good. People get to express their callings, lay people and clergy. We get to do things that are important. We have a safety net in order to do those things. We have a pathway for people to do that. And, campus ministries, camps, retirement communities, immigration ministries. It just goes on and on. Retreat ministries, connectional ministries. And the last thing I would just say, and I've said it 2 or 3 times, is the image of the healing-centered church, which includes justice, which includes anti-racism, which includes inclusion. Jesus was a healer. We have thought this has been very relevant because of everything our leaders and pastors have been through the last 10 years, with everything that's happened in the society and in our region. And so this is really a way the conference is trying to restore people. And when I say healing and what's happened, I'm not even touching on the things that happen in people's own personal health or relationships or losses. So coming together as a conference, there were some very healing moments where we sang together, and I want to thank Melody Galloway and everyone. But I always just hope that people leave conference closer to God and closer to each other in some way.
Yeah.
And I believe for many people that happens.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful. Yeah.
Well, Bishop, I've been waiting a full year to ask you this because every episode I've asked my guests this question. I start with this saying, Bishop, or I give my guests, and after General Conference, you sat and you started talking about moving us from a First Timothy understanding of who is called and what that looks like to a Pentecost. Your old men will dream dreams. Your old men will prophesy. Your young men will dream. Young men and women will dream dreams. Or is it prophesy? I'll see, now I got it messed up. You know what it is. You're switching us to everybody. So, to the two of you, you're long retired, whatever that is, right? You're looking back at the church. You haven't had not anything to do with it, but you haven't had your hands on it in quite some time. What's your dream? What would be your ideal for that kind of long term looking at the church? Something that you can hardly even really get your fingers on. Dream for us.
Yeah, I think that it would be, there's so much connection between the church and the community that you almost can't tell the difference. And that it's people supporting, encouraging, developing relationships with one another because of God's love for them.
I love it.
Yeah, and I would just say that I leave behind the resources that people can fulfill their callings in the same way I have had the opportunity to do that. And hopefully that I have enough maturity to detach and to rejoice that people will do the mission in a different way. It will look different, it will feel different, and that's good. And so those are a couple of my dreams. I love what Kim just said. I really love these 44 counties. I mean, I'm really attached to this part of the world. And I would just say, lastly, I see the dream already a reality in many places. I don't have to wait. I already see it happening in many places.
Well said, Bishop. He tricked me there. I hope you all noticed that. Well, thank you both so much for joining us on this special episode of Means of Grace Conference Wrap-Up. As we look back to Bishop Ken Carter and Reverend Kim Ingram, thank you for your wisdom, leadership, and your presence in the life of our conference. And to all of you who made the journey to Lake Junaluska, whether in person or in spirit, thank you for showing up, for being a part of the church that still believes in connection, still makes space for holy conversation, and still finds beauty in gathering beside still waters. As we move forward, may we carry with us the stories we've heard, the decisions we've made, the voices of our youth, the courage of our newly ordained clergy, and the collective calling to be the hands and feet of Christ in every corner of this world. If you are inspired by this episode or just want to relive the highlights, feel free to share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss upcoming episodes as we explore the people, places, and movements that are shaping our church today. This episode will include links to all of the information from annual conference you might need. And until next time, may the grace of Jesus Christ go before you. May the love of God surround you. And may the fellowship of the Holy Spirit sustain you in the days ahead. This is Means of Grace. I'm John Yeager. Be well and be the church.